It's not every day you see an HOA president go to war with the US government and lose so spectacularly that your illegal deck gets built under military supervision. But last Thursday was not every day. Last Thursday was the day the fragile, meticulously curated peace of Serenity Meadows was shattered by a woman in a turquoise tracksuit, 2 city buses, and, eventually, the full, unironic might of the State National Guard. And I had a front row seat. It all started, as most of my problems do, with the deck. Not just any deck. I'm talking about a 2-tiered, cedar-planked masterpiece of outdoor leisure. In my mind, it was already built, a sprawling testament to the sacred American traditions of grilling and napping in the sun. It was to have a built-in barbecue pit, forged from river stone and hope. Integrated bench seating for at least 30 of my closest friends. Or, more realistically, for me and a bag of chips. And a small, tasteful pergola over one corner for when the sun got a little too ambitious. It was, in short, my magnum opus of suburban bliss. "I'm telling you, Alex, it's a thing of beauty," Frank said, his thick contractor's finger tracing the lines on the blueprint. We had the plan spread across the dusty hood of his Ford F-150, the morning sun making the paper glow. But you got a problem. Frank was a man built like a cinder block, with a face that had seen 1,000 petty tyrants and lived to tell the tale. His apprentice, Kyle, a lanky kid who seemed to be perpetually amused by the world, leaned against the truck's grill, trying to hide a smirk. "Don't tell me," I sighed, already feeling the familiar throb of despair behind my eyes. "Let me guess. The grade of the wood screws isn't up to community standards?" "Worse," Frank grunted, tapping a section of the plans. "Setback line. Section 11, paragraph 4 of the Holy Bible over there says all structures must be 10 feet from the property line. This glorious beast of a deck is 8.5 feet. You're 18 inches over." 18 inches? Frank, my neighbor's prize-winning gnome collection encroaches more than that. This was my 3rd official submission to the Serenity Meadows Architectural Review Committee, a 3-headed hydra of boredom and spite presided over by its supreme leader, Carol Miller. The first rejection was because the cedar planks were specified as 5/4-inch thickness instead of the community standard of 1-inch nominal. The second time, after I'd dutifully corrected the plank dimensions, the rejection came back because the proposed stain color, rustic canyon, was deemed aesthetically incongruous with the subdivision's forward-facing visual palette. I'd been informed that taupe dreams or gentle fawn were acceptable alternatives. I was explaining this history of beige-based oppression to Frank when a new sound reached us, a rhythmic thwump, thwump, thwump of orthopedic sneakers hitting the pavement with a vengeance. "Oh no," Kyle muttered, his amusement finally fading into a look of genuine fear. As if summoned by the mere mention of her power, Carol Miller was power-walking toward us. She was a vision in turquoise velour, a white visor clamped to her immaculately coiffed blonde hair like a surgical instrument. In the crook of her arm, she cradled a thick 3-ring binder. The covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The gospel, according to Carol. Her approach, I've often thought, was like the T-Rex scene in Jurassic Park. You didn't see her at first, but you could feel the vibrations of her self-importance through the soles of your feet. She didn't slow down as she neared us, simply pivoted with the sharp precision of a drill sergeant. Her eyes, cold and assessing, ignored me completely and zeroed in on the blueprints. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "Unapproved planning session, I blinked. I'm sorry, what?" "Rule 7C, she snapped, already flipping her binder open to the correct dog-eared page. "All pre-construction consultations, including but not limited to architectural reviews and contractor meetings, must be logged with the Architectural Review Committee no less than 48 business hours in advance. Carol, this isn't a formal consultation, I reasoned, trying to keep my voice even. This is me and Frank, talking, in my driveway, about plans you've already rejected 3 times. The presence of blueprints and a licensed contractor constitutes a consultation, she declared, her certainty as solid and unyielding as the concrete beneath our feet. Her gaze then drifted down to the asphalt next to Frank's truck. Her eyes narrowed. And I see your contractor's vehicle is leaking a small, yet non-trivial amount of oil onto the aggregate driveway. She said aggregate driveway, like it was a sacred artifact she had personally blessed, I thought, my fists clenching in my pockets. Lady, it's concrete. I saw you spill a whole venti frappuccino on it last week, and you just kicked some mulch over it like a cat in a litter box. That's a level 2 environmental infraction, she continued, making a neat little note on a sheet attached to her clipboard. I'll have to document this, of course, for the record. She gave us a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a thin, triumphant slash of pink lipstick. It was the smile of a predator that had just successfully marked its territory. With a final, withering look at my dream deck blueprints, she pivoted and thumped away down the street, leaving a trail of silent judgment in her wake. Frank watched her go, slowly pulling a toothpick from his shirt pocket and sticking it in his mouth. He chewed on it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Kid," he finally said, carefully rolling up the blueprints, "you got a real piece of work here. Top shelf, Hall of Fame level. Call me when you get the stamp. Don't call me before." He and Kyle packed up their things and climbed into the truck. As they drove away, leaving me alone in my driveway, I felt a wave of profound, soul-crushing defeat. My deck, my beautiful, majestic deck, felt further away than ever, lost in a bureaucratic sea of taupe and arbitrary setbacks, lorded over by a tyrant in turquoise. Later that day, I was engaged in my usual post-frustration ritual, doom scrolling through the Serenity Meadows Neighbors Facebook group. It was a digital tire fire, a place where civility went to die. The feed was a chaotic jumble of posts that perfectly encapsulated the suburban condition. A blurry photo of a fox with the caption, "Is this your dog?" A passive-aggressive reminder about bringing in your trash cans precisely at 6 p.m. A desperate plea for a lost cat named Mittens, who was, according to the owner, a bit of a jerk, but we love him. And at least 3 posts an hour from a man named Chad, who was convinced the neighborhood's 5G cell tower was controlling his thoughts. I was about to log off and drown my sorrows in a pint of ice cream when I saw it. The post that would change everything. It had been shared by Gary, a relentlessly cheerful retired actuary who was the living embodiment of a golden retriever in human form. The original post was from the county public health department. "Great news, neighbors," Gary had written, accompanied by a string of happy face emojis. "The county's mobile vax-a-thon is coming to our area this Thursday. To make it as convenient as possible, they've chosen our lovely cul-de-sac as a staging point. Let's give them a warm Serenity Meadows welcome." The post included a slick graphic of 2 large, friendly-looking buses under the banner, "County Public Health, bringing health to you." The comment section, predictably, immediately detonated. It was like watching a science experiment where you mix a dozen volatile chemicals just to see what happens. The factions formed instantly. First came the enthusiasts, led by Gary. "What a great public service! So convenient for our elderly residents." They were immediately swarmed by the conspiracy theorists. Chad was first in line. "You guys know what's in those things, right? They're not telling you about the graphene oxide and the nanobots. It's a delivery system. I saw a YouTube video. Do your own research." Then came the logistical worriers, a faction of people whose primary concern was always, and only, how things would affect their personal schedules. Will there be adequate parking? The street is quite narrow. How long will they be here? I have an important Amazon delivery scheduled for 11 a.m., and the driver gets anxious if he can't pull right up to the curb. And, of course, the apathetic. Cool. Anyway, has anyone seen Mittens? I was scrolling, a grim smile on my face, when the final boss entered the chat. Carol Miller. Her comment landed with the subtlety of a tactical strike. It was a masterwork of the form, a 5-sentence novella of thinly veiled rage wrapped in the language of civic concern. While we all appreciate the spirit of public health, she began, I must express my grave concern about turning our residential, award-winning cul-de-sac into a public thoroughfare for a clinical event. There are serious issues of liability, unauthorized commercial activity on community property, potential wear and tear on our community-funded pavement, and the security implications of inviting scores of non-residents into our peaceful enclave. I will be looking into the legality of this incursion based on our HOA charter and consulting with our legal counsel. The safety and property values of our residents are my paramount concern. Incursion? I thought, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. She makes it sound like we're about to be stormed by Vikings, not visited by a couple of overworked nurses named Brenda, who probably just want to get through the day without someone yelling at them about microchips. The comment section erupted into a full-blown flame war. Gary tried to be a peacemaker, posting links to the county website. Chad posted a diagram of a 5G tower that looked like it was drawn by a child on a sugar high. Someone accused someone else of being a sheeple. It was glorious, unhinged chaos. I closed my laptop. A strange feeling was washing over me, a potent cocktail of dread and giddy anticipation. This was more than a Facebook argument. This was a declaration of war. Carol had drawn her line in the digital sand. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Frank. Me. Hey, might be some excitement in the neighborhood this Thursday. Keep your phone on. You might enjoy the show. His reply came back almost instantly. Frank, say no more. Thursday morning dawned with a deceptive tranquility. The sky was a crisp, impossibly blue dome. The birds were chirping their little hearts out, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the perfectly symmetrical maple trees that lined our street. It was the kind of morning that suburban real estate brochures are made of. It felt wrong. It felt like the eerie quiet in a war movie, right before the shelling starts. I woke up with a feeling I could only describe as pre-game jitters. This was my Super Bowl. I brewed an extra-large pot of coffee, the darkest roast I had, and selected my viewing location with the care of a sniper choosing his nest. I dragged my most comfortable armchair onto the front porch, positioning it for a perfect, unobstructed view of the entire cul-de-sac, from the entrance on the main road all the way down to Carol's house at the far end. This was the splash zone. The neighborhood was slowly waking up. I saw the blinds twitch in Chad the conspiracy theorist's front window. A few minutes later, Gary the enthusiast emerged onto his lawn and proudly planted a small, hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome nurses and health heroes." It was so earnest and wholesome, it was almost painful to look at. It was a sacrificial lamb to the gods of suburban warfare. At precisely 8:45 a.m., the door to Carol Miller's house opened. She emerged, and I immediately knew this was serious. She wasn't in her power-walking tracksuit. This was her battle dress. She wore a pair of impeccably creased khaki pants, a navy blue polo shirt with a custom-embroidered Serenity Meadows HOA President logo over the heart, and a pair of sensible but sturdy-looking walking shoes. She was equipped with her usual clipboard, but today there was a new accessory clipped to her belt, a walkie-talkie with a long, whip-like antenna. My internal monologue kicked into overdrive. A walkie-talkie. A walkie-talkie. Who is she talking to? The other HOA Karens in the tri-state area? Is there a secret Karen net I don't know about? A shadow government that communicates on UHF frequencies to coordinate their campaigns of terror against fun and reasonable stain colors? She did a quick patrol of her own lawn, adjusting a sprinkler head and glaring at a dandelion as if it had personally insulted her ancestors. Then she marched to the end of the cul-de-sac and took up a position, standing with her feet planted, her arms crossed, a solitary guardian at the gates of hell, or in this case, a really nice suburb. At 8:58 a.m., I heard it. A low, deep grumble that was decidedly not from a resident's minivan or an Amazon van. It was the rumble of heavy-duty diesel engines. I leaned forward in my chair, my coffee cup poised, my heart thumping with a rhythm that was half anxiety, half pure glee. Two vehicles, massive and gleaming white, turned slowly off the main road and onto our street. They looked like land yachts, impossibly large and out of place next to the Priuses and Honda CR-Vs that lined the driveways. On the side of the lead vehicle, in friendly, non-threatening blue letters, it read, "County Public Health, bringing health to you." The lead bus proceeded down the street at a stately 5 miles per hour, its air brakes hissing softly. It slowed as it approached the designated spot at the end of the cul-de-sac. And then it stopped. Because standing directly in its path, an unmovable object of pure, concentrated entitlement, was Carol Miller. The show was about to begin. The big white bus hissed to a halt about 20 feet from Carol, its engine idling with a deep, patient rumble. For a moment, nothing happened. It was a silent, suburban Western standoff. The pristine asphalt of Serenity Meadows was the OK Corral. In place of cowboys, there was a woman with a clipboard and a public health employee who probably just wanted a decent cup of coffee. The pneumatic door of the bus folded open with a satisfying whoosh. A woman in her mid-50s, wearing blue scrubs and sporting a formidable perm that looked like it could deflect small arms fire, leaned out. She held a giant, insulated travel mug that said, "Don't talk to me until I've had this." She had the weary, seen-it-all expression of someone who had dealt with every possible permutation of human nonsense. Let's call her Brenda. "Morning," Brenda called out, her voice raspy but clear. "You're gonna need to step aside, hun. Got a schedule to keep. People are waiting." Carol did not move a muscle. She lifted her clipboard like a royal scepter. "I am Carol Miller, president of this homeowners association," she announced, her voice ringing with officious authority. "This vehicle is in violation of multiple community bylaws, including Section 9, Subsection B, the prohibition of commercial and governmental vehicle staging without prior board approval, which, I can assure you, was neither sought nor granted." Brenda took a long, slow sip from her mug. She didn't seem angry or surprised. She just seemed tired. "This is a county public health vehicle on official business, sanctioned by the state. We have a permit. Now, for the last time, are you going to move, or do you want me to lean on the horn? It's a real loud one." This was not a deterrent to Carol. This was an invitation. She took a step forward, pulling a plastic laminated sheet from her clipboard. "According to the Serenity Meadows Charter, which all homeowners agree to upon purchase," she began, launching into a prepared speech, "the roads within this subdivision are private property maintained by community funds. As such, HOA regulations supersede any municipal permits regarding non-essential traffic. And a vax-a-thon," she said the word with visible disgust, "is decidedly non-essential to the aesthetic harmony of this community." She's filibustering a bus, I thought, taking a large gulp of coffee. This is a whole new, uncharted territory of municipal government. C-SPAN should be here. This is the content America craves. Forget boring congressional debates. I want to see a live feed of Carol versus Brenda. Brenda, to her infinite credit, seemed completely unfazed. While Carol droned on about pavement sealant and non-resident foot traffic, Brenda just sighed, pulled out her phone, and I swear to God started playing Candy Crush. The little triumphant pings from her phone provided a jaunty, surreal soundtrack to Carol's lecture on civic order. A few more neighbors had crept out of their houses now, drawn by the drama. Gary was hovering near his "Welcome Heroes" sign, looking deeply distressed. Chad was now on his front step, phone held aloft, likely live-streaming the tyranny to his 10 followers. I gave a little wave to my neighbor Dave across the street, a mild-mannered accountant. Dave just stared at the scene, shook his head slowly, and mouthed the words, "Oh my God." The driver of the second bus, a large man with a magnificent beard, got out and, completely ignoring Carol's ongoing monologue, began setting up orange traffic cones. He methodically placed them around the back of the first bus, effectively flanking Carol and creating a small, sad-looking barricade within a blockade. She was now not just a woman standing in front of a bus, but a woman standing in a clearly marked, yet utterly ignored, zone of contention. The absurdity was layering on itself, like a delicious, chaotic parfait. It was Gary, of course, who called the police. His wholesome heart couldn't handle the conflict. A few minutes later, a standard-issue Serenity Meadows police cruiser rolled silently up to the scene, its lights off. The doors opened and 2 officers emerged, moving with the heavy, reluctant gait of men who knew they were about to have a very, very stupid conversation. I recognized them instantly. The first was Officer Miller, a man so close to retirement you could practically smell the golf course on him. He had a permanent scowl etched into his face from years of dealing with things like this. It was Miller who'd given me a formal warning last summer, after Carol called in a complaint that my grass was half an inch over the HOA's 3-inch maximum height. The second was Officer Sanchez, a younger cop who still possessed a glimmer of optimism in his eyes, though it was fading fast. He was the designated peacekeeper. Officer Miller walked up to Carol, stopping a respectable distance away. "Carol," he said, his voice a gravelly sigh. "What's going on here? My dispatcher said something about you blocking a bus?" Carol's entire demeanor shifted. She saw the police not as a threat to her illegal blockade, but as her personal reinforcements. Her cavalry had arrived. "Officer Miller, thank goodness you're here," she said, beaming. "I need you to cite this vehicle for illegal parking, trespassing on private property and creating a public nuisance. The driver has been most uncooperative. I demand you have it removed immediately." She pointed at Brenda's bus. Brenda, in turn, looked up from her phone and gave the officers a small, weary wave. What followed was a masterclass in futility, a negotiation so pointless and circular it bordered on performance art. "Carol," Officer Miller began, his voice strained with forced patience. "This is a county vehicle. They're part of a public health program. They have a permit. We can't make them leave." "But my bylaws," Carol countered, tapping her laminated sheet, "supersede a county permit within the geographic boundaries of Serenity Meadows. It's in the charter. Article 4. Officer Sanchez stepped forward, trying his best to be diplomatic. "Ma'am, with all due respect, an HOA charter is a civil agreement. It does not supersede state and county law. That's not how jurisdiction works." Carol stared at him, unblinking. "Then the law is wrong." I nearly choked on my coffee. I scrambled for my phone, my fingers flying as I texted a play-by-play to Frank. Me. "She just told a cop that the law is wrong because her HOA bylaws disagree with it." Frank. "Is she wearing the polo shirt?" Me. "The navy blue one with the logo." Frank. "That's her final form. The prophecy is true. Tell me if she uses the phrase fiduciary duty. It's like her special move. On the street, Officer Miller was trying a different tack, appealing to the sliver of humanity he hoped still existed somewhere within Carol. Carol, come on. These people are here to help. For your neighbors. For elderly folks. It's a good thing for the community. Carol was immovable. She pivoted instantly. It's a liability. What if one of these outsiders trips on our perfectly regulated curb? The HOA could be sued into oblivion. I have a fiduciary duty to protect the community from litigation. I fist-pumped in my chair. Bingo. Me. She said the thing. She said fiduciary duty. Frank, I'm on my way. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Bringing Kyle. The cops were visibly wilting. Miller was pinching the bridge of his nose so hard, I thought he might leave a permanent dent. Sanchez had turned away slightly, but I could see his shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. The stalemate felt absolute. Then, Brenda the bus driver, having apparently reached a new level in Candy Crush, decided she'd had enough. She reached up and laid on the bus's air horn. The sound that erupted was biblical. It was a deep, deafening, soul-shaking blast that echoed off the houses and rattled the windows. Birds flew from the trees. A dog started barking hysterically down the street. Everyone, the cops, the neighbors, me, jumped. Everyone except Carol. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, glaring at the bus, her expression hardening into one of righteous indignation. She had become a martyr for the cause of beige-colored houses and perfectly manicured lawns. Officer Miller finally snapped. He threw his hands up in the air, a gesture of complete and utter surrender to the forces of absurdity. "All right, Carol. That's it," he said, his voice now dangerously calm. "You're creating a public nuisance and obstructing a government operation. I'm giving you one last chance. Move out of the way, or I am going to place you under arrest for disorderly conduct. And I mean it." Carol scoffed, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. "You wouldn't dare," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "My husband is a senior partner at his law firm. We know Judge Reynolds personally. We play bridge with his wife. This would be a false arrest lawsuit your pension couldn't possibly handle." I sat bolt upright in my chair. She did it. She actually did it. She pulled the "my husband's a lawyer" card, combined with the "we know the judge" card. It's a royal flush of entitlement. This was it. This was the final boss battle of suburbia, and she had just activated her ultimate power. While Miller was processing this new, terrifying dimension of the conflict, Brenda the bus driver calmly put down her phone. She picked up an official-looking radio handset from her dashboard console, the kind with a coiled cord. She pressed the button on the side. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, clear, and cut through the tense air like a knife. "Dispatch, this is Mobile Unit 1, she said, as if she were ordering a pizza. "We are at the Serenity Meadows location, encountering a civilian obstruction, non-compliant with local law enforcement, executing State Health Directive 74 Delta. Please advise ETA on support." A moment of static, then a voice, equally calm, crackled back from the radio. "Copy that, Unit 1. Directive 74 Delta is active. Response team is mobile. Stand by. ETA is 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Officer Miller stared at the bus, his face a mask of confusion. "What the hell is Directive 74 Delta?" he asked, to no one in particular. Brenda placed the handset back in its cradle and, as if to punctuate the moment, took another long, slow sip of her coffee. She looked at Miller, her expression not unkind but deeply serious. "It's a new one," she said. "The governor signed it into effect last month. He declared the mobile vaccine initiative a critical state health and security operation, something about ensuring rapid deployment in case of a public health emergency. The directive states that any and all obstructions are to be handled swiftly. A sudden, profound silence fell over the cul-de-sac. Even Carol, for the very first time, looked slightly uncertain. The mention of the governor, of a state directive, seemed to have finally penetrated her armor of self-importance. The threat of being arrested by a cop she played bridge with was one thing. A critical state health and security operation was something else entirely. 4 minutes. The countdown had begun. I gripped the arms of my porch chair, my knuckles white. I looked at my watch, then back at the scene unfolding before me. This was no longer just a story about a deck. This was a story about what happens when an unstoppable force of suburban bureaucracy meets an immovable object of government authority. And it was going to be better than any deck I could ever build. The next 3 minutes and 45 seconds were the most exquisitely tense moments of my entire life. The air in Serenity Meadows grew thick and heavy. The only sounds were the idle of the bus, the hysterical barking of the distant dog, and the faint, tinny sound of Chad, the conspiracy theorist, who was now narrating his live stream with the hushed, frantic whispers of a man documenting the apocalypse. "It's happening, people, it's happening! They're activating the protocols!" I found myself counting down the seconds in my head. 120, 119. The local cops, Miller and Sanchez, just stood by their car, looking utterly lost. They were in uncharted territory now, their authority having been so casually and completely superseded by a voice on a radio. Carol remained frozen in the street, her certainty visibly cracking like a cheap veneer. At the 30-second mark, I heard it. It started as a low, deep vibration that I felt more in my chest than in my ears. It wasn't traffic. It was too rhythmic, too coordinated. It was the sound of heavy machinery moving with purpose. The rumble grew louder, closer, resolving into the distinct, throaty growl of powerful engines. At the 4-minute mark precisely, it happened. 2 military-grade Humvees, painted in drab olive green, came tearing around the corner of the main road and into our sleepy cul-de-sac. They didn't slow down for the turn. They took it wide and fast, tires squealing in protest. They were followed immediately by a large, canvas-topped troop transport truck that looked like it had driven straight out of a war movie. They moved with a shocking speed and parked in a perfect 3-point tactical formation that effectively sealed off the entire end of the street. My jaw hung open. The coffee cup in my hand trembled. Holy moly. They sent the Guard. They actually sent the National Guard for a 60-year-old woman in a polo shirt who was upset about pavement sealant. This is the most beautiful, magnificently disproportionate response to a civilian complaint I have ever witnessed. My tax dollars are finally doing something I can truly be proud of. The back ramp of the troop transport truck slammed down onto the asphalt with a deafening clang. A dozen soldiers in full camouflage, helmets, and tactical vests poured out. They moved with a crisp, silent, professional urgency that was terrifying and hilarious in equal measure. They fanned out, creating a secure perimeter, their movements economical and precise. They didn't look like they were here to negotiate bylaws. They looked like they were here to secure a hostile landing zone. From the passenger side of the lead Humvee, an officer dismounted. He was tall and stood with a ramrod-straight posture that made the local cops look like slouching teenagers. His jawline looked like it had been carved from granite, and his expression was one of absolute, unflappable calm. He had captain's bars on his collar. He didn't look at the cops. He didn't look at Brenda, the bus driver. His gaze locked directly onto Carol. He strode towards her, his boots making no sound on the pavement. He stopped a respectful, but entirely non-negotiable 3 feet from her. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. It was a voice that did not expect to be argued with. Ma'am, he began, his eyes unwavering. I am Captain Evans of the State National Guard. You are currently obstructing a designated state emergency health operation under the authority of Governor's Emergency Directive 74 Delta. This cul-de-sac is now under the temporary operational control of the state government. Please return to your residence immediately. Carol's brain seemed to be buffering, trying to process this new, incomprehensible input. She stammered, her voice a pathetic squeak compared to the captain's steely calm. This is private property. I am the HOA president. You have no authority here. Captain Evans didn't even blink. Ma'am, your authority in this matter is not recognized under the terms of the emergency directive. Move now, or you will be removed. As he spoke the last word, two of his soldiers, who had been standing at ease nearby, took a single, synchronized half-step forward. They didn't say anything. They didn't have to. The message was clear. And just like that, Carol broke. It was like watching a balloon deflate. All the fight, all the righteous indignation, all the fiduciary duty drained out of her in one silent, horrifying moment. Her shoulders slumped. Her clipboard hung limply at her side. Her face, which had been a mask of defiant fury, crumbled into a mask of pure, bewildered terror. She gave a small, pathetic whimper, turned, and scurried back to her house without another word. She didn't even look back. The great tyrant of Serenity Meadows had been vanquished not by reason or argument, but by the calm, simple threat of overwhelming force. Captain Evans watched her go. He then turned to Officer Miller, who was still standing by his car, looking like he'd just seen a unicorn. "Thank you for your assistance, officer," Evans said with a crisp nod. "We have it from here." It was the most polite, yet undeniable dismissal I'd ever heard. Miller and Sanchez, looking both relieved and utterly bewildered, simply nodded, got into their cruiser, and drove away. Their war was over. Finally, Captain Evans turned to Brenda, the bus driver, who had been watching the entire exchange with a small, satisfied smile. He gave her a sharp, respectful nod. "Ma'am," he said, "you are clear to proceed." Brenda gave him a two-fingered salute. "Thank you, Captain." With a triumphant hiss of its air brakes, Mobile Unit 1 rolled forward and parked perfectly at the end of the cul-de-sac. The Vax-a-thon was officially open for business. I had assumed that once Carol was dispatched, the guard would just hang back, maybe stand around looking intimidating. I was wrong. The guard did not do hanging back. Captain Evans was running an operation. With a series of quiet hand signals, he set his troops to work. The cul-de-sac was transformed. First, a team of 4 soldiers unfurled a large olive-drab command tent. They began setting it up with brutal efficiency, driving stakes into the ground. The chosen location? The absolute center of Carol Miller's prize-winning HOA-mandated, perfectly manicured front lawn. Her prize rose bushes, the ones that had won the Community Garden of the Year award 3 years running, became impromptu hangars for tactical vests and helmets. Next, a communications team ran a thick black cable from one of the trucks to Carol's house. One of the soldiers shimmied up a downspout with the agility of a squirrel, got onto the roof, and began erecting a temporary communications antenna right next to her chimney. I could see Carol's face, a pale, horrified oval, appear in her front window, staring up at the soldier desecrating her roofline. Meanwhile, the rest of the soldiers had tasks. A couple of them began politely but firmly directing traffic as the first cars of people seeking vaccinations began to arrive. "Yes, sir. Parking is available in the designated zone just past the Maple. Please keep the center lane clear." Another group, apparently on a scheduled break, began doing physical training exercises in the middle of the street. Push-ups, jumping jacks, burpees. Just a casual morning workout in the middle of our occupied suburb. I was in a state of pure, unadulterated bliss. This was history. I was taking pictures with my phone, sending them to everyone I knew. I was live tweeting the whole affair. My phone was vibrating off the table with replies. And then I got a text. It was from Frank. Frank, I'm on my way, bringing donuts for the troops. The neighborhood had come alive with a mix of terror and delight. Gary the enthusiast was trying to offer the soldiers bottles of lukewarm lemonade, which they politely declined. Chad, the conspiracy theorist's live stream, had descended into a frantic, breathless rant about martial law and FEMA camps. Most of my other neighbors were just peering out their windows, their faces pressed against the glass, mouths hanging open in a state of collective shock. This was, without a doubt, the most exciting thing to ever happen in Serenity Meadows. A few minutes later, Frank's F-150 rumbled up the street. He and Kyle got out. Frank was holding 2 massive boxes from the Good Donut place downtown. He stopped at the edge of my driveway and just surveyed the scene. The Humvees, the soldiers doing push-ups, the command tent on Carol's lawn. A look of pure, unadulterated reverence spread across his face. "It's," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Come on," I said, grinning. "Let's go thank our liberators." The 3 of us, armed with fresh donuts, walked over to Captain Evans, who was studying a map spread on the hood of his Humvee. "Captain," I said, trying to sound official, "my friends and I just wanted to, thank you for your service to our community this morning. We brought donuts." Captain Evans looked up. His expression didn't change, but he gave a curt nod. He took a classic glazed from the box Frank offered. "Appreciate it," he said, taking a bite. "Just doing our job. Things running smoothly on your end?" This was it. The moment. Frank, a genius of opportunity, saw the opening and drove a truck through it. "Almost, Captain," Frank said, his voice a perfect blend of respect and professional concern. He gestured with his thumb back toward my yard. "We're the contractors for this man's construction project right here. Got held up this morning by some local administrative issues. We were given the go-ahead, but we don't want to get in your way or disrupt the operation." Captain Evans, a man clearly focused on the logistics of his mission, glanced at Frank's work truck, at the tools in the back, then at my yard. He misunderstood completely, and it was the most glorious misunderstanding of my life. He assumed we were part of some wider, pre-approved county or state effort. "Construction?" he said, nodding to himself. "Right. The infrastructure support? No, you're not in the way at all. The directive is to facilitate all approved operations and remove any obstacles. Get to it, gentlemen. You're cleared hot. Let me know if you need an escort for your materials delivery." He gave us another crisp nod, turned, and walked away to supervise the placement of a water cooler next to his tent. The 3 of us stood there, frozen, the donut boxes still in Frank's hands. We looked at each other. My heart was hammering. Kyle's eyes were wide with disbelief. A slow, magnificent grin spread across Frank's face. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He turned to Kyle. "You heard the man," he said, his voice low and triumphant. "That's a direct order from the United States Armed Forces. Start digging the footings." As Kyle scrambled to the truck to get the shovels and post-hole digger, the first beautiful, defiant sound of construction began in my backyard. It was the sound of a shovel hitting dirt. It was the sound of freedom. I looked over at Carol's house. Her pale face was still visible in the window, her horrified gaze now fixed on the illegal deck being born in her kingdom, under the benevolent, unknowing protection of a military occupation she herself had caused. It was the sweetest victory of my life. 1 week later, I was sitting in a throne of my own making. My deck was finished. The cedar was new and fragrant. The stone of the barbecue pit was cool to the touch, and the rustic canyon stain was, I have to say, absolutely breathtaking. It was even more glorious than the blueprints had suggested. I was holding a cold beer, the bottle sweating in the late afternoon sun, and watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The occupation, as it came to be known, had lasted for 8 glorious hours. The vaccine clinic was a roaring success, helped in no small part by the local news, who showed up around noon to report on the bizarre spectacle of a military-protected vax site. The footage of soldiers doing jumping jacks while grandmas got their shots went viral. When the guard left, they packed up with the same stunning efficiency with which they had arrived. The antenna came down, the trucks were loaded, and the command tent was folded away. They vanished as quickly as they had come, leaving behind only the faint impressions of combat boots in the grass and 2 large, perfectly rectangular patches of dead brown turf on Carol's once flawless lawn. They were badges of shame she couldn't mow away. Carol's reign of terror was over. Her spirit and her authority were irrevocably broken. She resigned as HOA president via a terse 2-sentence email the very next day, citing personal health reasons. A new, far more reasonable council was formed, led by a triumphant Gary, whose first official act was to retroactively approve my deck plans, post facto. The legend of Operation Serenity Freedom became the defining myth of our neighborhood. It was told and retold at every block party and 4th of July barbecue. Carol became a neighborhood ghost, a cautionary tale whispered among homeowners planning to paint their front door a non-approved color. She was rarely seen outside her home, a prisoner in her own beige fortress. I took a long sip of my beer, the taste crisp and cold. I looked across my yard, over my beautiful, unpermitted, and now fully legal fence, to Carol's house. I could see the brown patches on her lawn, a permanent scar on her suburban perfection. I raised my bottle in a silent, victorious toast. They say you can't fight City Hall, but as it turns out, City Hall, and especially the HOA, can't fight the U.S. military. And sometimes, all it takes is one woman with a clipboard, one unimpressed bus driver named Brenda, and one obscure state directive that no one ever bothered to read, to bring a little bit of beautiful, weaponized sanity to a place like Serenity Meadows. My deck stands as a monument to that day. And man, is it a great place to grill a steak,